Hey guys, this will be video 14 for the how to design build a 59 Korina Les Paul replica using Stuart McDonald templates. And I will devote the latter half of this video spending some time talking about these templates, even though it'll be not just the carving templates, but the whole guitar template set. So for those of you that are just kind of checking into this series, I might have already talked about this. Let me get that cough drop out of my mouth. I might have already talked about this in extensive detail on the front end, but I'm going to cover it again so that you'll know what it is that we've got in front of us. But the first part of the video, I'm going to be talking about binding and how to go about doing your binding. I will not be doing any binding work on camera in this video, but I probably will in the next video for the hollow body Flying V, because I've been working on that project on the side, so much so that I was about ready to finish that video series as well, and I've got a ton of binding to do related to that guitar. So if you want to stick around and learn how to do binding, I'll probably really show you how to do it on camera with related to that guitar. This guitar, I'm just going to keep it very simple because, quite frankly, we're just doing the one-piece binding, or that's what I elected to go with, because I had even mentioned, I'm still kind of torn about whether I'm going to do a tortoise binding and a cream and all this jazz and blah, blah, blah. And very early in the video series, I had considered building the large headstock for the actual custom replica design, but I didn't want to fool with that. And this being a 59, once I cut this small headstock profile, that defined a whole lot of the other reasoning about what I do with the job, or the course that I would take on finishing the rest of the job. In other words, you wouldn't have done the small headstock and then come in with the custom, the five-piece binding, five-piece binding on the headstock, or maybe it's 7 on the headstock. I know it's a 7-piece on the top for a Les Paul custom replica or a Les Paul, and I know it's 5-piece binding on the back of the body. So it's a very binding heavy project, and hence why they call it the custom, because it's all a lot of custom work. But since this one is a standard and we'll be receiving the trapezoid inlays, a rosewood fretboard, even though it's Korina on the neck and the body, this is still very much, and with the single piece, let me explain what I'm talking about. Once you have the small headstock and you're not doing any binding and you're painting that face black, then you've already entered into the realm of this is a standard. Okay, it's a standard all day long. So once you come out of the gate with the standard profile, let's maintain standard. Don't come in and do block inlays, and you don't want to be doing a trapezoid inlay at the first fret location. It would start at the third. See what I'm saying? All those things would start define. Once you cut this profile, it's going to really lead you through the entire job as to what you should or should not do in order to keep it in context, as well as maintain the value as well. So get you in trouble if you start creating this hybrid-esque guitar just because you're excited about it, especially when you're someone like me, because eventually I always sell my guitars. I never thought I would sell that little guitar over there, but I'm ready to let it go because I'm moving on to other pastures. But the cool thing about it's going to be easy to sell that guitar. Why? Because it's a 59 standard. Look at that. There's no trapezoid inlay at the first. Starts at the third. That's historically accurate. And they're thin binding at the neck. Les Paul actual from Stuart McDonald, the large dot markers with the tortoise color to them. Very thick, fat, round, chunky little neck. Goes into the single binding. The 60 thousandths binding. Maple top. You see what I'm saying? Where I'm going with this is, even though this was a project that I got to do custom for myself, I kept it very much in keeping with a 59 or a 58. So it'll be easy to sell this little guitar. other than that little deviation right there. But it'll be easier to sell this guitar and get some of my money back, my build money. I call it my build money. I won't make a killing off of it, but at least I won't eat it. So hence the same thing here. Standard headstock took us into a standard fretboard, standard neck, a little bit thinner 59 profile, then into the footprint of the true 59 because I used the StewMac templates. And then the fact that this will become a gold top with the single binding, it's a very valuable little guitar. Okay, so let me check the time. 5 minutes, 47 seconds. Might have been a little bit too much information there, but I hope that makes sense why sometimes when I open up my videos, I talk about the hypothetical situations because I just want you to know that if you're going to build a guitar, always know that there's a possibility you might need to sell it or you might want to sell it because once you finish it, you might realize that, oh man, I'm ready to build another one. Now, and that's typically what is going to happen. I've never ever met anyone that has ever built one or two guitars that became satisfied. They always wanted to build another one and then another one. And then they got the thing I thought, or then they got the thing and thought, I wonder what it would take to build an Explorer. I wonder if I could do that. Next thing you know, you're building an Explorer or a Flying V, or you're building something crazy that nobody wants but you. So always be in that mode of how could I unload this guitar in order to fund my next project. And that's what a lot of us, I think that's why a lot of us sell our guitars, is because A, we get too many in the house, and then B, we want to use those proceeds to fund spending $300 to $500 on woods and pickups and all that jazz. So how do you do this? If you're right-handed, always start here with your binding, and you typically you could spot glue that, kind of like spot welding, while you're holding your while you're setting up your fixture. You could spot weld that and then set up to do the rest of the job. But the Stuart McDonald glue that I use is so fast. I typically just get that glued in, go ahead and pull it around a little bit to make certain that it's not cocked or I'm not riding high, things like that. And once you get a really good foundation, then you just start doing your glue work. And as I mentioned, I'm not going to go into detail how to do binding related to this project at all. I'm going to really try to force myself to not talk about the binding too much, other than how it relates to why I went with the 60 thousandths single cream rather than white. Don't go too cream though. Let me show you something here. And I don't know what they were thinking. I have no idea what they were thinking. But this is from Stuart McDonald. This is their vintage cream. That's the ugliest I've ever seen in my life. And I was so frustrated because I bought this, I mean, it's I don't know if it's peach or if it's tangerine, but it sure as hell is not vintage. It's more pink. I would say it's salmon. Okay, okay. So be extremely careful with your vintage tint stuff. And I should have sent that back, got my money back because that was not cheap. But nonetheless, I do like the all parts cream because it has a bit of just a sweet, soft, creamy look to it. It doesn't have any artificial look to it at all. It's a beautiful, and that's cream. And to me, that looks like a vintage parchment white more than it does anything. It doesn't look cream at all. I'll say that it is. And see, this will give you an idea. See that nut? That's a bone nut, non-bleached. So to me, that's closer to a bone white, which is a beautiful binding for doing vintage guitars or replicas. Because this might shock you, but that guitar right there, well, I may be wrong. I can't remember. I do know that on the neck there is no nitrocellulose lacquer on the binding on the neck. There may be out here on the body, but Yeah, it feels pretty smooth. But nonetheless, it looks so good. And once you buff it out with like a steel wool, you don't even have to really clear coat this. Okay. All parts, cream, binding, looks really good. And in comparison to, we'll just keep talking about binding. In comparison to the Stark White, and the Stark White, it is pretty. Because I got to tell you, that 55 Les Paul custom replica that I built for Ethan down in Savannah, we used all white binding, and it was really beautiful. And it was cool once I had the guitar finished up. Well, the body had not been painted because he did all the paint work, but I did all the binding. And someone, actually, two or three people were chiming in because they were blown away because they had never seen a mid 50s Les Paul custom the way it looked when it came out of the factory, with the beautiful white binding. And I mean, everyone was like, "Wow, that's amazing! How stunning and how crisp the detail is, especially up in these curves right here." So anyway, keep that in the back of your mind. If you do the cream, be extremely careful when you start doing your multi-piece binding because you'd be surprised. The white looks really good, and you can always shoot it with a little bit of tinted amber nitro cellulose lacquer. But I wouldn't recommend getting your binding from this company. Not throwing them under the bus because I spent a ton of money with them, but that color is ridiculous. So, all right, let me check the time. 11 minutes of binding rambling. What do I need to talk about now? I want to try to keep this video around 30 minutes or so tops because I keep saying I want to get my videos under control, but I'm really serious this time. One thing I will show here, that way I can get this finished, because this is I'll shoot straight with you. This is the only reason that I did this video. I didn't even want to do a video until I had the binding finished, and then I could show it to everyone and brag about how good I am at doing binding, even after I haven't done binding for 3 or 4 months. But keeping in mind, by starting up there first, you use the heat gun just a little bit right here to make certain it doesn't crack on you, especially if you're working in the dead of winter. But when you get to this corner, you better really slow down and think about how to keep this under control, because 5 times out of 10, they typically break on me, and I'm having to fit them back in. Obviously, if I did binding on a guitar every day, I wouldn't have that problem, and I would have the feel for my heat gun under control and all that jazz. But I got lucky on this one. It did not break on me, but only because once I got up to this point right here, and the binding was about right there, it was obviously glued all the way around to about right there. That's when I paused and let it dry for about 30 minutes. But I made certain it didn't have a glob of crap in there, and I dug anything out. And then I came in with it at this. Now keep in mind, I would have had to have had about that much right there, minimum. So it was sticking off about like that right there. Then I took my heat gun and started just gently warming it. I had it on high, but I had the heat gun about probably back here. So much so that if it started hurting my hand, then I knew it was getting pretty darn hot. And I would this is weird, I would kind of intentionally keep my hands close so that if I started feeling the heat on my hand, I knew that it was getting heat there. Obviously, you're not going to burn yourself because you can, but once you start feeling it soften up, then see if I can do it. Let me do this. This is really important because this is where you'll lose your guitar and you'll lose your cool. Let's say it looked something like this right here. I'm not going to do it because that'll break if I start pushing it. But the way you want to be holding the body is you want to be right in here getting ready to go and pull it in like this as you're going around it with your finger. But be careful. You might have to wear a leather glove because this is going to be really, really hot. But even if it's a little bit painful and hot, just suffer through it because if you stop, it's probably going to cool off and it's going to break. So once you begin to heat this up and begin to pull this in and heat it, and then you're going to start seeing it want to start bend around that curve a little bit. Then really focus on putting the heat back here and back here, and then all of a sudden just push it in. Now you don't have any glue in there. All you're doing now is pulling it in to hold that profile. And the first thing you want to do is really pull it tight and push right here. If you've got a gap right here, shoot it with the heat until you can come in with something kind of heavy so that you can really push it. And if you're not able to get to turn that curve, see you're holding it down here, put a little bit more heat. Don't it'll start curling on you. It'll melt so quickly you'll lose control. But make certain that you're pushing it in around this corner and then pull it in real tight and just sit there for about 10 minutes and hold it. And then once you let loose, it'll spring out, and then you can feed your glue down in there. And once you feed your glue in, only feed your glue right in here, pull that in and down, tape over it. But if you notice that little window that you see right there, don't try to tape over that window. Leave that open so you can monitor it. Okay, and that's exactly what I saw when I did my first structural pull. It was basically like that right there, and it looked exactly like that. And I was able to ascertain, am I really getting a good bite right there? And it was perfect. Okay. However, you'll notice, and I'll probably will stop talking about the binding here fairly shortly, but one thing that you will notice, uh, there is this there's this gaping the spot of missing binding. And so what I will be doing next is coming in, and I'm not about to try to do this on camera. I don't have a problem cleaning some of this glue off of the mahogany back here, but what I will be doing, some of the squeeze out, I'll be getting this squeeze out cleaned off, and then I'll be shaving any of the dried glue off the top of that binding, because the binding, let me see if I can get this in the camera. I wish I could get this a little bit closer, but I can't risk screwing up the guitar. But basically, because we know that we've already shaped the top of the guitar, that's very close to the finished guitar right there. Let's see if I can get that other one. And be real careful right here, because you might think, oh yeah, that's the top of the guitar, so I need to go ahead and shave down to that, only to realize that you forgot that when you were doing your initial pre-shaping, you got way too low on your wood, and you were going to rely on your binding to redefine the actual proper thickness from the back of the guitar to the top of the binding. So don't go scraper happy right here. But I do know that up here, it's okay to scrape into that mahogany just a little. But I'm going to back off. I know it's okay, but I'm just going to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm not going to shape that down, because right now this binding is high about, it's over a 32nd of an inch, but it's not a 16th of an inch. If it was over a 16th of an inch, then I screwed up. I got my mahogany too low or something like that. So what's going to happen with this binding, it's going to get leveled off a little bit. And then if there's a low spot, like if there is a low spot back there, then I'm going to let the binding define where I do my fill in with my epoxy. And since I'm going to be doing a gold top, I'll go ahead and tint the epoxy gold. And that way I'm beginning to kind of fill in with a tinted filler, so that once I start shooting my gold, it'll be really beautiful. Take time. 19 minutes. Yeah, there was some pretty detailed information there, but I think you see my point about I'm about to have to come in here and clean off this shelf, so I better stop before I screw. Well, you want to know the truth? You really couldn't screw this up, but let me show you what it is I'm dealing with. I've got to I've got to put a little cap in there. And I've got to be really good at doing that because that's going to define whether I know what I'm doing or not. And all the more reason to just do it in stages. Do this part first. See, like the old Les Pauls, I think they put a filler up under it and then they put this binding atop it. But with this binding glue, with these two chemicals right here, and this is not a digression. This is a little bit more information than I really wanted to spend. But with your acetone and your Stuart McDonald Bindall, this is about $30 for this little thing, but it's worth $100. Hear me out. Don't try anything else. I've tried everything. This stuff is amazing. And once you get good at it and you know how to store it, you won't screw it up. And the key is right now, I know that when I pull this cap off right here, uh, that glue is almost at the throat. It's right at below the throat. So don't leave it with a ton of air in there because you'll lose your binding. And so keep it, you know, pressed up. And then, so in other words, every bit of that cavity right there is just full of binding glue. And then a lot of times I'll just give it a real gentle squeeze and I'll get some off the top with the toothpick, and I'll use that toothpick to do my spot gluing. But the trick is to keep a little bit of acetone. I made this brush. I have no idea what this is. It's just an old nylon bristle that I cut off of some brush. That is dental floss. That would be a bamboo skewer. And then I just made my own little bristle. And then probably put some epoxy on it and wound it, or probably just spun this. Yeah, probably spun that with a dental floss because I could use that to tighten up this brush and turn that brush into a fan brush or turn it into, you know, a round brush or obviously cut it on an angle. But the way you use this right here is when your binding is like hanging off of your guitar, you come in and you dip into your acetone. You go ahead and put a little bit of glue in here, not much, but then you take your acetone and put it on the back of your binding and kind of soften that binding. And as soon as you start pulling that binding and hold it, you better once you get it where you want it, you better hold it immediately because it'll dry just like that. You still need to tape it because if you don't tape it, it'll start swelling. Okay, so I'm just giving you a bunch of general information to get you in the process of when you're looking at your crispy clean table with nothing on it, you better make certain that your acetone is very close by. And the way I do this, I typically have, you could use a cup. And this is some real cowboy stuff right here, but you got a little bit of acetone, probably about 1/4 of an inch deep. Just let your little brush stay in that acetone and then have your binding in the glass. If you lay this down, once you open this up, the stuff will just blow out and it'll make a mess. And you're already dealing with something that's really, really requiring you to be very organized and very, very thoughtful about your operations because you don't need to be worrying about what's going on over here. You got to stay 100% focused on keeping this binding, you know, perfectly up against the lower and also perfectly in that direction. So you're working, you know, from all different angles. And after it's all said and done, and you'll see this in a day or two whenever I pull this out of the tape, this little cap, I will do the cap and I'll be using the acetone and the bind all together with a little bitty piece. It might work from this right here. I might be able to use that and just put it in there and then just press it in. And that's something I won't tape. I'll just sit there and hold that. And I don't know if I can show this on the, I don't think I can show that on the camera. I'll do the best I can to show that on the camera. But this is very important. I know it may sound like I'm just going off a tangent here, but all you're doing is just putting a little cap atop that. And 85% of that cap, if not 90% of that cap, is going to be carved away. And you're just wanting to assure that you weld your cap to this lower so that there is not a glue up line. That's all you're doing. And even if there is a glue up line, big deal. Who cares? It's in the cutaway. It's down up under your waist anyway. I shouldn't say that. Who cares? I do care, and I'm very thoughtful of that stuff because I have to sell these guitars. And if it's being either in video format or presented in video format or either pictorial format, I want people to look at that and not see the either discoloration or a poor glue line. And the only way I can guarantee that I don't have those things is with the StewMac bindall and the acetone working in tandem. And as I had mentioned, I'm not affiliated with StewMac. I just have used their stuff a long time, like a lot of you guys out there. And nor is my channel monetized. However, as you've noticed, after about a week or two, typically they start advertising on our channels, whether we want them to or not. So if there's anybody advertising on my videos that you're watching, I have nothing to do with that. So, and I wish I could control it. I could if I did pay the premium, maybe became a premium YouTube content provider. But if you want to know the truth, I kind of like the small, intimate network of just a few people watching because my videos I never intended them to be for entertainment purposes. I was trying to approach it from a vocational standpoint and help you guys learn how to build a guitar. Let me get a cough drop here. Okay, let me pause, get organized a little bit, and think about how I want to end the video. Okay, let's dive back in and keep talking about binding primarily. And if I do talk about templates at all, it'll be just briefly because I want to try to keep this video under 35 minutes, hopefully. I had mentioned if you're right-handed, start from up here, only because it seems to work easier for me when I'm binding to be pushing with my right hand. Let's say I had just come around this corner, I had this taped, and I was, and I'm working with a piece of binding that's like 65 inches long, and I'm trying to not damage it. Well, it works easier for me, and keep in mind, I've got that taped, so I'm not having to worry about that coming loose, and it's taped all the way back here, so it's in good hands. Now it's easier for me to come in and do whatever amount of glue I need to do and or acetone work I need to do. And typically when I get to this point right here, I go ahead and I do glue all the way around to about right there. And this is where I learned from Robert Benedetto. It was so cool. Now keep in mind, he's doing like 7 pieces at a time. And I can do that in certain respects. But then you're able to push that around like that right there and hold it and hold it and hold it. And keeping in mind that when you weren't just pushing it around straight, you were pushing down on it as well to make certain that you buried it down into the shelf against the body. And so in other words, don't just try to panic and work in 3-inch long sections. Go ahead and do this. Take this all the way around here. Put some temporary tape out here, just one little piece, just enough to keep it from trying to pull loose. So that's holding that in place. Then come over here. Tell you what, I'll go ahead and do it. Then, and I'm going to show you my tape station in a second. Then come over here. You'll have something like that right there. Then you can come over here and make certain that you're really holding it down. I'm working with my right hand because I'm right-handed. And then I'm come up with and hold it down with my left hand as I'm doing my tape work. Tape number 1, number 2, number 3. Well, actually the way I do my tape, I do every other one. I'll tape right here, then I'll tape right here, I'll tape right here, etc., etc. And then I'll come back and I'll visually sight through the areas that are not taped, and I will assure myself that, yeah, man, I'm in good shape. That binding is making incredible contact with the body, and nothing funky happened, nothing got twisted or any of that jazz. Then I typically just go ahead and continue to tape from the bottom up and push down, because once I get it right here, I want to be able to tape it about this long right here. I want to be able to do this right here. Really press that in, make certain that I'm holding that in place, and that my left hand is over here. The tape is holding it over here, and then I'm just pulling a little bit. I pull it in, and I use that tape to pull. And you'd be surprised how unbelievably strong the tape is after you have the entire perimeter taped. It's not going anywhere. And you let it dry overnight. Good 12 to 14 hours, because if you might be under the impression that oh wow, it's nice and strong, it's not moving. But if you remove that tape, any binding that you've done, the more binding that you have done, the worse the swelling will be. So it might be beautiful when you just finished the binding job. You'll come back the next day and it will be a puffy, swollen up mess. You've got to tape every bit of it. Don't think just because you look down and you see this beautiful 7-piece line that you just ran. If you don't have it taped or fastened, it'll swell up real bad. That's worth its weight in gold, knowing that right there. Okay. So, and I have mentioned this before. If you want to figure out how to make money building guitars, get really good at doing binding, because there are very few people out there that can do really good binding jobs. And if you're doing restoration work and you're in Atlanta, Nashville, Austin, pick your town where there is money and there are people with vintage guitars. Just become the binding expert, and you'll do incredibly well. Okay, no charge for that either. All right, let's talk about a tape station. You need to make a little tape station. I got this idea from Stuart McDonald. I like mine because I can come in and put it anywhere. You can see that I can either screw it down to the table, and on my other table over there, I've got like 4 or 5 different places where sometimes I'll have it screwed to the table right here, or either right here, or if I'm working on this table up here, which is a tall table, then I'll put my clamp in here and I'll just clamp this to the table, and then I can still get access to it. And all that is a hacksaw blade cut off, a couple of pieces of pine. I don't know if I can get this out. Just a screw or a little bolt, dowel rod, piece of PVC. It's probably 2.5 inch, just enough to hold my tape. Okay, so make yourself a little tape station, and it's best if you've got it fastened in place. But if not, you can. It's pretty easy to reach over here one-handed, as long as I press it across that. See, I can get it to tear. So if my hand is like, if I'm having to hold something, even though it's not weighted, it works pretty well. You got to have good access to your tape, because I have tried to pull all the tape off before and hang it on a pattern, but it just gets dust on it, or either I end up not needing it as I've tore it off, or either it's too short or it's too long or it's too something. So anyway, that's what your guitar should look like when it's all taped up. And then you can see how it doesn't need a massive tape right there if the first 2 tape jobs were not any good. In other words, if you didn't really have that pressed in and held well, the tape that you put atop that's not going to do any good. But for a little trivia for you here, you'll see that how the pieces of tape up under these pieces on the top, they're much shorter. They stop back here, and even though I had it taped, I kept holding pressure on it until I got the longer ones on top that reached down farther and even went farther up on the body. and that's not making contact with the body. I'm relying on the fact that I pulled that tape all the way up here to the belly for this one. Okay. Probably should have done it over here as well, but hopefully I didn't need it. We'll find out once I pull the tape off. So anyway, let me check my list here. So build yourself a little tape station, because I believe those are $45 to $60 at Stewart McDonald. And to my knowledge, I don't think you can clamp them down. Let me pause and clear my throat. Okay, should be able to finish the video in this section. The reason I have this string up on the table is because if you build long enough, you're going to amass an enormous amount of shorts. Sometimes they'll be, 24, 30, 40, whatever length, but this stuff is so expensive, I don't throw anything away. Now, if I'm doing a job for a client, I'm not going to come in and splice together a Les Paul custom replica. That's not what I'm saying. But if you've got, I'm not going to grab the box, because I've got a box over there that it looks like a chaotic mess of just plastic. But that stuff is extremely valuable. And if you're working on a project, or you're getting ready to do a project, and you want to assess, well, I wonder if I got enough binding. Take your tape and tape your string at the beginning, and then obviously just take this around, and don't do it cheaply. Really pull it around just like you're doing the binding, and then tape it right there. And then once you get to that point, then pull your string all the way around the body. Just keep going, because this being layout string for contractors, it's really good about not stretching. And then just keep going around, and then put tape on it right there. It's kind of like you're just doing your binding. Tape it right there, pull it all the way around, and then take a Sharpie, and then Sharpie out about an extra 1/8 of an inch to a quarter. Now, don't Sharpie out a 1/2 of an inch. You're using this string to really determine what is the minimum amount of binding that I need to build this guitar, because the Flying V over there, the piece of binding that you get, typically I think some of it is like 64 and some of it is 65. Well, I need that extra inch, and if it's 64, it's not long enough. But this guitar, whatever the length is, it's fine for your standard binding. But if you're building a custom footprint guitar, you can use that string to determine your length, and then just then obviously clip it or cut it and take it over and put it on your binding, and then just see if it's long enough. Just pull it along the binding, and then the mark will not lie, nor will the binding length lie. So that's the reason that string is on the table. The last thing I'll talk about is a template for, and the reason I have this up here is also, in addition to, if you get really good at doing binding, or if you get really good at building templates, I'll shoot really straight with you. I could probably make $100 a day just producing vintage 58 Explorer replica or replacement pick guards, whether they be parchment white, whether they be black, or whether they be the rear covers, or they actually be, this may not look like much, but this little square edge out here is actually in order to make a Explorer output jack plate. And I could blindfold, I could put that atop a piece of plastic and put it on my router, zip, 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 do those 3 sides, take it loose, turn it, do the final cut. Probably sell these for $100, So if you get good at making templates, you get good at doing binding, you could make some really good money. Now, the reason I have this, because you're going to have to learn how to do those type templates if you're getting ready to build a custom guitar, because you're going to be building your own, you're going to be building your own pick guards, because, and this is not a digression, this is very much incredible theory, because even if you order a set of drawings for a guitar that's a custom guitar and you're all excited about it, well, only to find that the scale that they drew is different from the scale that you're using, because once you change that scale, then this pickup location, everything's going to change. The location is going to change. This location is not going to change, but these locations right here are going to shift. And that ain't something you can buy off the shelf. And I think we all know that. So that's what I meant. You're going to have to get really good at engineering your project on paper, then on plywood, and then turn it into templates, and then turn it into multiple templates where you can do multiple jobs. And the reason I have this on the table, I'll talk about this just briefly, but this is the Stuart McDonald template set 59. Okay, and I won't go into that, but what I'm holding here in my left hand is a special template I made that is exactly 1/4 of an inch smaller than the footprint of this 59, and I was able to use that in order to do my custom binding for that 50s replica that I built. I did all my binding work on this. I'm going to show you this briefly. This is not a digression. And I can assure you this is not a waste of time. And I would have loved for someone to have shown me something like this. We'll just go over here. Keep in mind, all this binding is just loose. Or maybe you did glue the beginning, and that's going to be trash. That's going to get cut off. Let's just, I don't want you to cut it too close. But once you get that first spot, let me pull that out of the way. I could probably glue 10 pieces of binding, 15 pieces of binding, 20 thousandths. But the cool thing is you only need 6. And what is that? Les Paul Custom. And by using this template, you're able to guarantee that you're keeping a real good. Now this is real sloppy what I'm doing here. I would actually have this probably fastened and or clamped to something where I can really torque and pull, hold, tape, do all this massive taping. And then once I know that that's all covered in tape and it's all structurally pulled, then I can move on and do the rest of this. The reason I show it on this little template is because now you're not fighting the guitar body, and you're not risking damaging the guitar body. But then you can very easily pull this out of this jig the next day and glue that one piece of, and now it's just one piece of binding. You glue that on, then atop the guitar, now you're only doing the one piece binding. Okay, so a little bit of trivia there for you, and a little bit of trade secrets, but I haven't seen anybody offer the solution as to how to do custom bind. And I'm not talking about the Gibson Les Paul custom. I'm talking about a custom guitar. All of your big body jazz guitars, this is one of the first things that I had to suffer through and learn how to do. Because if you're going to build the big body jazz guitars, well, you got to learn how to do binding, and you got to do that binding really well. It's got to be beautiful. Okay, but that's a given. So anyway, that's the reason that's on the table. I'm not going to start talking about these templates, but here are the templates, and with these templates, you're able to lay out the whole guitar. And then if you change your scale, and then let's say this was an Explorer, you can't get an Explorer template, but if you did change your scale, then you might end up going with a 25-inch scale that obviously, as I mentioned, this can't change, but then this part right here would shift, or it might open up. Or you might do a single coil pickup up here, and this has got to really open up. So start thinking along those lines of, how can I buy this template set for several $100s. I think it was between $300 to $400 for all of these. I might be way high, but it was worth it because once I had this this position here, which is the 16th fret location, and I had these locations right here. See, that's where the bridge stud is, and here's the tailpiece stud. Obviously, there's four. I'm doing this because you might not see it in the camera, but there's your bridge. Man, once I had this template, I realized I can build whatever the hell I want. I can build a Flying V, a SG. I can build a Les Paul Jr., a Studio. Or I can build a custom that's based on the Gibson scale and layout. So these templates are phenomenal for that. Or if I am building a custom guitar, I can determine where I just have to look at this, insert things this way. I can, with this template here, I can gauge exactly where that would be the neck volume, the bridge volume, tone, based on this template here. And if I build some sort of funky, you know what, custom footprint, well then I can make a determination between where I'm wanting to put my neck volume and their 1950s neck volume, so that when I'm playing my Les Paul for 3 hours, but then I pick up my custom guitar, guess where my volume knob is? It's in the exact location of the guitar I've been playing. So those are the things I like to talk about in these video series. You know, don't change what works. And tradition, they might have spent a lot of time determining where those potentiometers go. So don't change it because some pro already determined, yeah, it's better to do this or do that, et cetera, et cetera. And I've learned from building this exact replica that anytime I ever had an idea, like, oh, they ought to do this, I wonder why they didn't do this, then if I tried that, very quickly I realized, no man, they had it right to begin with. Other than the SG connecting the body at like the 20th fret or whatever that is, that never made any sense. So anyway, I want to stop the video. 47 minutes of a hell of a lot of good information there. It might have been crazy chaotic, but I don't think anybody after 20 minutes of watching my videos are here for entertainment. So hopefully you guys got something out of that, and I appreciate you dropping in. The next time I'll have this binding off, and I'm glad I tapped that a little bit. The more you do, the more it will start changing the tone. And then once it starts getting the lacquer buildup on it, the tone will continue to change a little bit. And it's really cool to hear them get more focused and more centered, and just the vocal aspects of the species that you're putting together come alive. So anyway, I appreciate you dropping in. I'll see you guys in the next video.